You know what's funny about buying a TV in 2026? Sony is now telling us that their mini LED is better than their own OLED. Think about that for a second. The same company that's been pushing OLED technology for years is now saying, actually, our LED TV is the flagship now. So what changed? Did OLED suddenly get worse? Or did something else happen that nobody's talking about? I've been watching this shift happen for the last 3 years, and what I'm seeing isn't just about picture quality. It's about money, market trends, and companies betting on what you're willing to pay for. And here's the part that concerns me. Thousands of people are buying these TVs right now without understanding what they're actually getting. Some are paying $3,000 for OLED and regretting it 6 months later. Others are buying mini LED and wondering why everyone said OLED was better. So before you spend your hard-earned money on either one of these, you need to hear the whole story. But first, let me ask you to do something. If you've ever felt confused shopping for a TV because the technology keeps changing, hit that subscribe button. Smash the like button if you want straight answers without the marketing talk. And here's my question for you today. Which TV are you using right now, and what problems are you facing with it? Is it burning in after watching the same channel? Is the screen too dim during daytime? Are you dealing with flickering or weird software bugs? Drop your answer in the comments, because your real-world experience might save someone else from making an expensive mistake. Now let's dig into this OLED versus mini LED war that Sony is waging against itself. Setting the stage, here's what we're looking at today. 2 Sony televisions. The Sony A95L, which is a QD OLED from 2023 that's still being sold in 2026. And the Sony Bravia 9, which is a mini LED from 2024 that Sony is now calling their flagship. Wait, did you catch that? The OLED is older, but Sony is still selling it. The mini LED is newer, and Sony says it's their best TV. So which one should you buy? That depends on a lot more than just which technology sounds fancier. And before we get into specs and brightness numbers, I want to take you back to a time when this stuff was simpler, because understanding how we got here will help you understand why this decision matters so much. The positioning problem. So let's talk about how Sony is positioning these 2 TVs. The A95L is marketed as their premium OLED. Perfect blacks, cinema quality picture, reference level color accuracy. The Bravia 9 is marketed as their flagship mini LED. Brightest TV they've ever made. Best for bright rooms, better sound system. Notice what's happening here? Sony isn't saying one is better than the other. They're saying they're both premium, but for different uses. And that's where the confusion starts. Because when you walk into Best Buy or you browse Amazon, you see 2 Sony TVs at similar price points. One says OLED, one says mini LED. And unless you understand what those words actually mean for your living room, you're guessing. Here's what I want you to understand before we go any further. This isn't about which TV is objectively better. It's about which TV is better for your specific room, your viewing habits, and your budget. And the regret I'm seeing online? It's almost always because people bought the wrong technology for their environment. Technology breakdown. Let me explain these 2 technologies in plain English. OLED stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode. What does that mean? Each pixel creates its own light. When a pixel needs to be black, it turns completely off. No backlight behind it, just pure, perfect black. That's why OLED looks so incredible in dark rooms. Mini LED is different. It's still an LCD panel, but instead of one big backlight, it has thousands of tiny LED lights behind it. The Sony Bravia 9 has way more dimming zones than older LED TVs. How many exactly? Sony says 325% more zones than their previous flagship, the X95L. What does that do for you? It gives you much deeper blacks than old LED TVs, and way more brightness than any OLED can produce. But here's the catch. Even with thousands of zones, Mini LED can't control every single pixel independently like OLED can. So you might see blooming, which is a halo of light around bright objects on dark backgrounds. And that's the fundamental trade-off. OLED gives you perfect blacks but lower brightness. Mini LED gives you higher brightness but not quite perfect blacks. A95L Deep Dive. Let's start with the Sony A95L. This is a QD OLED panel, which means it uses quantum dots for color instead of white OLED with color filters like LG uses. What's the benefit? Brighter colors, better HDR performance, and peak brightness around 1400 nits in HDR highlights. That's actually pretty impressive for OLED. But here's what real users are reporting. In a dark room, this TV is absolutely stunning. The blacks are perfect. The contrast is infinite. Movies look like you're watching them in a cinema. But put this TV in a bright living room with windows, that's when people start feeling regret. Because while 1400 nits sounds high, it's only on small highlights. Full screen brightness is much lower. And if you've got sunlight hitting the screen, you're going to see reflections. You're going to struggle with dark scenes during the day. And that's when people start thinking, maybe I should have bought the brighter Mini LED instead. Then there's the burn-in concern. Is burn-in still a problem in 2026? Yes and no. Modern OLEDs have better protection than older models. But if you watch a lot of news channels with static logos, or if you leave the same thing on screen for hours every day, you're taking a risk. Sony offers some burn-in protection features, but there's no guarantee. And that's a real concern when you're spending $3,000 or more. Bravia 9 Deep Dive. Now let's talk about the Sony Bravia 9. This is Sony's answer to people who said, OLED is great, but I need more brightness. Sony is marketing this as their brightest TV ever. How bright? They won't give exact numbers, but reviewers are measuring significantly higher peak brightness than the A95L. We're talking bright enough to compete with direct sunlight in your living room. And for a lot of people, especially those watching sports, daytime TV, or gaming in bright rooms, that extra brightness makes a huge difference. The colors pop more. HDR highlights are more impactful. And you don't have to close the curtains to see what's on screen. But here's where the Bravia 9 runs into problems. Some early units had local dimming flicker. That means the backlight zones would flicker during certain scenes, especially in dark content. Sony released firmware updates to fix this, but it's still a talking point in 2026. Did they completely fix it? Most reviewers say yes, but some users are still reporting minor issues. Then there's blooming. Even with all those dimming zones, you're still going to see some halo effect around bright objects on dark backgrounds. Is it terrible? No. It's actually very well controlled compared to cheaper LED TVs. But if you're watching a lot of dark, moody content with subtitles, you'll notice it. And if you're coming from OLED, it's going to bother you. Sound quality reality. Here's something most people don't think about until after they buy. Sound quality. The Sony A95L has something called acoustic surface audio. What is that? The screen itself vibrates to create sound. It's a 2.2 channel system, and it sounds remarkably clear and detailed. If you're not planning to buy a soundbar, the A95L gives you very good audio right out of the box. The Sony Bravia 9 has Acoustic Multi-Audio Plus. That's a 2.2.2 channel system with beam tweeters. It's rated at around 70 watts. And here's what reviewers are saying. It's louder than the A95L. It has more of a surround sound feel, especially for sports and action movies. But does it sound better? That's subjective. The A95L sounds more refined and natural. The Bravia 9 sounds more powerful and dynamic. If you watch a lot of sports or action content and you want volume without a soundbar, the Bravia 9 wins. If you watch dialogue-heavy dramas and you care about clarity, the A95L might be better. Either way, both are significantly better than the thin, tinny speakers you get on budget TVs. Regional differences. Now here's something that's going to frustrate you. The sizes and prices you can get depend on where you live. In the United States, the A95L comes in 55-inch, 65-inch, and 77-inch. The Bravia 9 comes in 65-inch, 75-inch, and 85-inch. Notice the overlap? Only at 65 inches. So if you want a 77-inch TV from Sony, you're buying OLED. If you want an 85-inch Sony, you're buying mini LED. Your technology choice is being made for you based on size. In Europe, it's even more complicated. The Bravia 9 initially launched with only 75 and 85-inch models. Sony later added a 65-inch version because people complained. But for over a year, if you wanted a smaller premium Sony in Europe, you had to buy OLED. And the pricing? It varies wildly. In the US, you can find the A95L 77-inch for around $3,500 on sale. The Bravia 9 65-inch sits around $3,000. In the UK, the A95L 65-inch is around £3,200 to £3,500. The Bravia 9 75-inch is about £4,400. So you're paying a premium for mini LED in Europe, while in the US, OLED is often more expensive. Does that make sense? Not really, but that's how global pricing works. The pricing trap. Let's talk about what these TVs actually cost in March 2026. The Sony A95L is a 2023 model that's been discounted. You can find the 77-inch for around $3,500, sometimes less during sales. That's down from the original $5,000 launch price. The Sony Bravia 9 is newer, from 2024, and it's holding its price better. The 65-inch is around $3,000. The 75-inch is around $3,500 to $4,000. So here's the trap. If you're comparing a 65-inch A95L to a 65-inch Bravia 9, you might see them both priced around $3,000. At that point, which one do you choose? The older OLED with perfect blacks, or the newer Mini LED with more brightness? Most people are choosing based on which one is on sale that week. And that's a mistake. Because you're making a technology choice based on a temporary discount, not based on what actually works in your room. And 6 months later, that's when the regret posts start appearing on Reddit. Reliability concerns. Now I need to talk about something that makes people uncomfortable. Reliability. The Sony A95L uses OLED panels made by Samsung Display. These are QD OLED panels, and they're relatively new compared to LG's WOLED technology. What does that mean for longevity? We don't have 10-year data yet. We know that OLED panels can experience burn-in if you're not careful. We know that brightness can degrade over time. But how much and how fast? That's still being determined with real-world usage. The Sony Bravia 9 uses mini LED LCD technology, which doesn't have burn-in risk, but it does have other potential issues. Some users reported local dimming bugs that required firmware updates. Some reported dead pixels or backlight uniformity problems. Are these widespread? Hard to say, but they're documented. Here's my advice. If you're buying either of these TVs, seriously consider the extended warranty. I know extended warranties feel like a waste of money, but when we're talking about $3,000 electronics with complex panels and software that can fail, that protection might be worth it, especially if you're planning to keep this TV for 10 years like we used to. The real decision. So let's get to the real question. Which one should you actually buy? If you have a dedicated dark theater room, if you watch mostly movies at night, if you care deeply about perfect black levels and infinite contrast, buy the Sony A95L. You will not regret the OLED experience in that environment. If you have a bright living room with windows, if you watch a lot of daytime TV and sports, If you're worried about burn-in from static content, buy the Sony Bravia 9. The extra brightness and no burn-in risk will make you happier long-term. But here's what bothers me about this whole situation. Sony is forcing you to make a choice between two technologies that both have compromises. Why doesn't Sony make an OLED that's as bright as the Bravia 9? They're working on it, but it's not here yet. Why doesn't Sony make a mini LED with perfect blacks like OLED? Because the technology isn't there yet. So you're stuck choosing which compromise you can live with. And that's frustrating when you're spending this much money. Market trends. Here's something you should know about where this market is heading. Mini LED sales are exploding. In North America, mini LED LCD shipments grew 227% year-over-year in 2024. In Western Europe, they grew 30%. Meanwhile, OLED is still dominant in premium revenue. In Europe, OLED accounts for 23% of TV revenue despite being only 8% of units sold. What does that tell you? OLED is still the premium choice for enthusiasts who know what they want. But mini LED is where the mass market is moving because it's brighter, cheaper, and doesn't have burn-in risk. Sony knows this. That's why they're pushing the Bravia 9 as their flagship. They're betting that more people need brightness than need perfect blacks. And based on sales numbers, they're probably right. But that doesn't mean OLED is dead. It just means the market is splitting into two camps. Here's what should you actually do before you buy? First, go to a store and look at both technologies side by side if you can. Best Buy usually has both OLED and mini LED models on display. Look at them in the store lighting. Then, imagine them in your actual room. Is your room brighter or darker than the store? Second, measure your room's ambient light. Are you watching TV during the day with windows open? Or are you mostly watching at night with lights off? Be honest with yourself about your viewing habits. Third, read the return policy before you buy. Most retailers give you at least 2 weeks, sometimes 30 days. Use that time. Set the TV up in your actual room. Watch your actual content. If it's not working for you, return it. Don't feel bad about it. This is a major purchase, and you deserve to get it right. Fourth, check the specific size and model you're buying. Remember, not all sizes are available in both technologies. If you want 77 inches from Sony, you're buying OLED. If you want 85 inches, you're buying mini LED. Make sure you're okay with that before you commit. So, here's my final take on this whole OLED versus mini LED war. Sony isn't trying to trick you. They're offering two different solutions for two different problems. The problem is, most people don't know which problem they have until after they've already bought the TV. The A95L is an incredible OLED that will give you reference quality picture in the right environment. The Bravia 9 is an incredible mini LED that will give you brightness and durability in a bright room. Neither one is the wrong choice. But one of them might be the wrong choice for your specific situation. And that's what I want to save you from. Because the regret I'm seeing online isn't about bad TVs. It's about people buying the right TV for the wrong room. So take your time. Do your research. Ignore the sale prices and focus on what actually works in your space. And if you make that decision thoughtfully, you won't be the one posting about regret 6 months from now. That's it for today. If this helped you understand the difference between these technologies, subscribe for more honest breakdowns. Drop your questions in the comments, and I'll answer as many as I can. And remember, the best TV is the one that works in your room, not the one the internet says is better. I'll see you in the next one.